Dr. Alok Bansal and participants to this workshop organized by India Foundation on Foreign Policy of India. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak on India-ASEAN relations. I believe you've had a full day of interactions and maybe your mind is saturated and, brimming with questions. So what I'll do is, and I believe that at least on the subject of ASEAN, India relations, you've already had an exposure with Nagma Malik, our High Commissioner to Brunei, speaking about the bilateral aspect of the relationship with that country in the ASEAN region. And Javed Ashraf, our High Commissioner in Singapore, who gave you a much broader geopolitical importance of both ASEAN and ASEAN-India relations. So I will not then repeat the same thing. I had planned to maybe speak a little bit about that. I would rather sit comfortably on that armchair and take questions. But what I could really share is what is breaking news in terms of the freshest news about India-ASEAN relations. And that was the summit that happened just 3 days back. And really this was a commemorative summit intended to celebrate 25 years of India-ASEAN relations. In 1992, we first established a sectoral dialogue with the ASEAN countries. And thereafter, it was elevated to a regular dialogue. And then became a strategic partner. So we were really celebrating 25 years of this dialogue partnership, 15 years of summit level. So really for the last 15 years, the Indian Prime Minister has invariably attended the annual ASEAN-related summits in which there is always a standalone ASEAN-India summit as well. That's the time when they also have the ARF, and the ARF is really at a ministerial level, but the East Asia Summit and other ASEAN-related summits. And then we were, of course, celebrating 5 years of our strategic partnership. 5 years back, you would recall, in December 2012, we had invited the 10 leaders from the ASEAN countries for a summit to mark the 20th anniversary. And the attendance at that time was, I think, all the heads of state and government from ASEAN came except Philippines, which was represented at the level of their vice president. This particular 25th anniversary celebrations and the commemorative summit on 25th took on an added dimension because they were also invited as chief guests for our Republic Day. And that is unprecedented. It has never happened. You would all know that when we have a visiting foreign dignitary as the chief guest for our Republic Day, it's always just one person. And to have all 10. And not only just have all 10, the fact that I think now that it's implemented, I can share with you that it was an audacious idea, to have 10 of them, invite them, accept them as our chief guests, sends out, just in terms of symbolism, a huge message for them to be watching that amazing parade, which celebrates Indian nationalism and Indian achievement, both in terms of defense as well as cultural, the diversity of India, etc., was quite an experience. What was equally amazing was the fact that all the 10 leaders had confirmed their participation nearly 1 year in advance. And that showed their commitment. We talk about us inviting them to show that they are the fulcrum of India's Act East policy. But that it is a reciprocal relationship, that it was reciprocated just as enthusiastically. It is very difficult for heads of state, heads of government to be able to commit their time so much in advance, but actually all of them had committed themselves to their participation, showed the importance they attached to ASEAN, India's relations with the ASEAN region, and the invitation for a greater participation for India in the Indo-Pacific. I think that is what the main story was all about. In terms of our own Republic Day celebrations, apart from it being an unprecedented gesture, the fact that we could get them all on time on Rajpath by 10 o'clock. They were staying in 5 different hotels, and this is when, in terms of logistics and bandobast, hundreds and thousands of Indians are actually there on Rajpath. So it is quite a huge security nightmare in any case. And to just have one visiting dignitary in the middle of our National Day celebrations is always a huge challenge. But to have 5 of them living in 5 different hotels, come through the bubble movement without inconveniencing the people in Delhi. And more than what normally anyway happens on a Republic Day itself was a feat. But what was even more significant, again, if you were to just look at symbols, was the fact that we showcased in 2 tableaus. We began the parade with all the flags of the ASEAN countries, really to honor the visiting dignitaries. Thereafter, when the tableaus started, we had 2 tableaus showcasing ASEAN. One was focused on trade and education, and the other one was focused on our cultural links. So it really, the elements that were projected was the Nalanda University, which recaptured our strong educational linkages and of that of Buddhism, of Nalanda being such a strong center of Buddhism. There was Bodh Gaya, because again, Bodh Gaya has a huge resonance amongst all the Indian Buddhist sites. It is Bodh Gaya which has the largest significance and for the ASEAN practicing Buddhists. There was a boat, one of the tableaus, the first one in fact had a boat recapturing the Bali Jatra and the traditional trade route that we had taken. Our people took thousands of years back, and it's through the maritime trade route, highlighting the maritime domain aspect of this relationship, the maritime connect to this relationship. And then the last part was really that of the Ramayana. Again, a very strong footprint of this great epic. And in fact, this was further reinforced because during the summit, we invited 10 Ramayana troops who performed in New Delhi, starting from 22nd of January till 24th. And then they have been traveling, so they're still in the process of performing and traveling to other cities of India, to highlight at the time when there was Ramayana happening, as part of the celebrations in the capital, it was able to recapture, the attention on that aspect of our cultural link resonated very strongly, both in Delhi and as well as in the Southeast Asian countries. But above all, the most important symbolic significance was the fact that you had foreign content. You had the 2 tableaus and you had a group of school children bring together ASEAN dances, and they were performed just for 2 minutes. But this is also unprecedented. Republic Day is really intended to celebrate India, celebrate Indianness. In a way, it's very chauvinistic, everything, our achievements, whether it is the state tableaus that are put together, whether it is the defense march that happens of our defense forces, or, the defense equipment, the indigenously made, Akash and Brahmos and all of it. It's very much a strong celebration of India's nationalism. And in that, to have, for the first time, foreign content that brought together ASEAN cultural connect, the ASEAN relations. It was the first time that the Ministry of External Affairs, in fact, had a tableau. We had other ministries do so, and this time there was one from Akashvani as well. But that also sent out a very strong message of India's foreign policy, of what you have been discussing all of today. And this is about our philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that the world is one family, or what Prime Minister said in Davos, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. That today, India, poised as it is at this particular level of growth and a leading power, or intended to be the pacifist leading power, it is prepared to play its role in the global space as a factor of peace, as a factor of prosperity and stability, encompassing our traditional values of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, or Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. And that is the symbol that was not lost, certainly, on those who sat, the 10 leaders who sat on the dais watching it, as it was reiterated during our leadership's meeting with these 10 leaders when they met bilaterally. And it came out in the Delhi Declaration that was finally adopted at the end of the summit. So the summit format was also quite unique. It began with Rashtrapati ji hosting a luncheon banquet for the dignitaries. And then our Prime Minister sat with just the leaders in a retreat format. So they discussed very freely, very frankly. The topic was maritime cooperation. In fact, earlier we'd done a series of activities. In fact, we did more than 50 activities in the last 1 year to celebrate very important aspects of our relationship. There was one which India Foundation has been a partner for, and that was the youth, and the youth summit that we did in Bhopal. And youth related, we did several other activities, culminating in a youth awards, which was given out on 23rd of January. And we did a hackathon, and we did an artist residence retreat. We did a band festival for the first time, bringing together younger musicians from the 10 countries, along with musicians from India, to interact and perform in Delhi. And it had, just as the Youth Summit was such a popular element, where on their own the participants declared that they would want this institutionalized and as an annual event. And just for India Foundation's information, one of the participants, Mr. Hun Mani, who from Cambodia, who was the youngest parliamentarian from Cambodia, was then finally awarded the Padma Shri on 25th of evening. It was announced. So that was yet another first of its kind. That to mark the silver jubilee of India-ASEAN relations, 10 eminent personalities who'd made contributions in their individual spaces and in bringing India-ASEAN closer together from each of the 10 countries was conferred the Padma Shri. And of course, yet another unique aspect of the celebrations were a piece, an op-ed piece written by our Prime Minister in more than 27 newspapers in all the 10 ASEAN countries, and the Singapore Prime Minister, who's the current chair of ASEAN, who contributed an article in 3 Indian newspapers. So if you're talking about marketing, if there's a marketing strategy, we could not have marketed India-ASEAN better than we did during this summit, where we had 1.2 billion people today suddenly become very aware of the importance of ASEAN, even to know geographically where ASEAN is and what does it mean. And vice versa, because the fact that their leaders were present and participating in our National Day was something that was understood by this collective group of nearly 2 billion people who were who make a solid mass of not just population but geopolitical space, but also economic space, given the fact that today we are economically a dynamic economy where if you're looking at value chains and to be part of a trade and investment connect, it is really this dynamic region of ASEAN which will be important in terms of our future prospects. And so that was, I got distracted in terms of youth being an important component. But those were the basic elements of the messaging that came out of the summit. But I'll stop here and be very happy to take questions, because there might be an area of interest that you might want to know about, and rather than me digressing to something that may be less relevant to you. So thank you very much.